and welcome to this Forbes Middle East webinar in partnership with GBM Oman, highlighting and discussing banking fraud and cybersecurity risks in a digitized world. It is no secret that the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated this shift towards digital services across sectors, leading to a rise in the prevalence and sophistication of fraud attempts. Today's experts in this panel will be shedding this and highlighting this topic to discuss the new and innovative banking fraud and cybercrime schemes and solutions that will help protect both banks and customers alike. Allow me to start by introducing our experts, and then we'll be going around with the topics of the day. I welcome Ahmad Qarout, who's the Digital Infrastructure Solutions DIS Manager at GBM Oman. Ahmad Sayed, who's the Chief Data Scientist, Data and AI from IBM. Anis Abdullah Raisi, who's the Head of Operational Risk at Bank Dhofar. Salman Kabani, who's the Head Market Risk and Operational Risk and Strategy at Bank Nizwa. And last but not least, Rakesh Kumar, who's the Head of Operational Risk Management at Ahli Bank. Rakesh, allow me to start with you, since you are bringing your experience on this topic from a banking perspective. One of the main sectors we'll be discussing today. Scammers are using increasingly sophisticated routes and schemes and new tricks to constantly commit different kinds of crimes and frauds. How is Ahli Bank developing this approach, your approach, to ensure that it is effectively monitoring, predicting, and preventing these types of risks and threats and suspicious activities?
Hi, Jesse.
Hello.
I hope you're doing fine. You know, there's the advancement in digital technology and especially in banking, digital banking. So we are progressing fast, and so are the scammers also. So the more we progress, the more sophisticated and innovative ways they adopt to either dupe the customers or to the bank also. They defraud the banks, and every day they are coming with some innovative, and we have to be all the time on our toes to counter them so that our customers, our bank is protected. We at Ahli Bank are totally committed towards the safety of our customers, as well as we try to put banks at total free risk, so that everybody is having, our customers have continuous confidence in Ahli Bank, in our system and processes, so that they feel that they are safe, their money, everything is safe with the bank. Here we have adopted the required tools, required applications, required processes to prevent and monitor and malware attack, thwart malware attacks, suspicious activities and all. We have at Ahli Bank taken steps and put to use the innovative, all required tools to be able to withstand with their threats. You know, in our bank, we have divided this security risk in two parts, basically, two categories, because the risk mitigation is to be taken differently for them. First, for the risk for the banks, and then risk for the customers. The risk for the bank, we have to put our infrastructure, we have to fortify our infrastructures, we have to train our employees, we have to executives also properly, so that all the time people are aware of the risk. They should be risk conscious, and at all staff, all employee level also. For the customers, we try to, since the modus operandi is different to dupe the customers, we try to educate them, their do's and don'ts, we try to educate them. For bank as this thing, we have put a system, security system at place, security framework, which we ensure to adhere without fail. We are very strict towards the security structure which we have formulated. This security structure, like in all areas, maybe like application security, server hardening, vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, security information and event management, we collect all the information, all the logs, and analyze them on a continuous basis to initiate any steps required or to thwart any suspicious activities or any attacks which are bank is targeted for. So that we have already employed, and we do that with that. Second thing, like in order to prevent this attacks to come to our banks, our endpoints, that endpoint like laptops, desktops, our network, this thing to be protected against the external intrusions. So to protect that, we protect them through firewall, through the intrusion prevention system, the detection system, intrusion detection system also, and logs generated through all these systems are analyzed on a continuous basis to see possible threats and take suitable action for that.
Okay, that makes sense. You've mentioned many solutions. Allow me to stop you here just so I can go to one of the partners you probably work with. Bank sectors work with IBM a lot to offer some of these solutions that you have mentioned, Rakesh. So allow me to go to Ahmad. Ahmad, we've seen, and you've heard now from banking perspective, this rapid shift from conventional banking to digital solutions. In your opinion, how do you think banks can deter fraud using and implementing AI and other technologies like the ones Rakesh has mentioned?
Okay, great. So basically what digital banking is doing is really opening up like new channels for online, mobile, that have to work in tandem with the traditional channels. So while today that's a must for every financial institution, this puts them at a higher exposure to new touch point that fraudsters and criminals can exploit in many different ways. And they are getting smarter, more creative, more sophisticated to find the loopholes in the system and stay ahead of the game. So of course, today banks have the big challenge to monitor more products, more channels, more scheme, and they have to react very quickly, real time or near real time, because the market demands have decreased the clearing cycles, reducing the window in which they can act to detect and prevent fraud. And at the same time, they have to do all that without impacting customer experience, because we know customer acquisition is like 6 to 7 times more expensive than customer retention. Yeah. So the traditional approach to deal with that used to be like implement a rule-based system, which come basically with a set of pre-designed rules by some anti-fraud expert. But we all know that rules-based system can't keep up with all these new challenges because these rules are subjective. They are limited to the anti-fraud expert, to whoever designed these rules, and they are very hard to scale and to evolve to the new dynamics of the market. And these rules today are generating very large amount, like more than 95% of false alerts. So today we have the challenge that investigators are spending 95% of their time and effort and money on these false alerts. So what AI can do in that perspective is that instead of coming with pre-assumptions of how fraud works for a specific bank, we let the data speak for itself. So we just run a machine learning algorithm that analyze financial and non-financial events and detect patterns from historical data on how fraud is happening and being able to adapt very automatically in a very continuous manner to new fraud pattern as they happen. And to be able to as well to do that in a batch or real-time mode and integrate that back into the enterprise fraud management system. So of course, IBM has large experience doing that globally. For example, we've done that with one of the largest banks in New Zealand, which is Bank of New Zealand, where actually they were considered as a leader in the fraud prevention versus their peers. So they used to have like 75% hit rate, fraud hit rate, with a false positive of 1 to 5, while the region average was 1 to 12. So they were very happy about that. But once they started to implement the AI and advanced analytics using IBM solution, like IBM Safer Payments, they could really take it to the next level. So we could help them to reach a fraud hit rate of 87% versus 75%, and in the same time, reducing the false positive rate from 1 to 5 to 1.15 to 1. So basically reduction of 77% of false alerts. So you can imagine really the advantages that we can offer when we implement AI algorithm and AI technologies on the bottom line of the financial institutions.
Okay, I mean, this all makes sense. So if you allow me to go, to Ahmad to discuss prevention, we hear a lot about the importance of anticipating and preventing, which would save a lot of obviously capital and the hassle and having to go through so many steps. What precautionary measures, from your opinion, should banks take to avoid suspicious activities from happening and maybe anticipate it?
So, as you rightfully said, Jesse, we are in a digital age now, where more and more digital services are needed. They are required, and it is very critical for banks to be able to get in touch with their customers through these digital channels. And cybercrime is becoming the biggest challenge that humanity is facing, and probably is going to be the biggest one for the next 2 decades. For that, and if you look at the damages that are coming from these cyber crimes, you're looking about $6 trillion globally, which would be the 3rd biggest country in terms of GDP when you look at it after US.
What is this number? The number I looked at recently said anticipation and cost on world economy would be $2 trillion this year alone, globally. What is the number you just mentioned? 6 trillion where and what year? 6
trillion USD globally in 2021.
Oh, wow. We have really different numbers. The one
yes.
So between 2 trillion.
So this is the damages. This is the damages that can be inflicted with cybercrime.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different numbers. Yeah.
And these damages, can get from stolen money, loss of efficiency, fraud, as our main discussion today, even the reputational harm. So even in terms of reputational amount, you can amount that to the amount. So our region is no stranger to these cyber crimes, and we've seen it through GBM's cybersecurity annual study that, and especially in these times with since COVID started, 51% of companies have seen double the amount of attacks and frauds through our survey.
Yeah.
So definitely we need to look at measures that banks need to take. And one of the most important measures that banks need to take is looking into the latest of technologies to be embedded into their day-to-day processes. This is very crucial. Like we said, that things like AI, technologies like AI, machine learning is crucial to be able to do the analytics and understanding of what's happening, to be able to detect, like you mentioned, as instantly what's happening. So these are very critical things. And we're also looking at vulnerabilities that we're seeing from the adoption of cloud, even in Oman, where cloud has not been adopted in the past, but it's more and more getting there. And through the local cloud providers, we're seeing this adoption happening. So the measures have to be taken as well in that area.
Okay, let's go back to a bank's perspective. I'm coming to you, Salman, to get your perspective on how, in your opinion, threats can be anticipated or predicted.
The rapid transformation adoption, we can say the digital adoption of the industries, including banking industry, led by COVID-19, has created a lot of opportunities and threats. Opportunities for the scammers, for those having a malicious interest, and the threats for the industries running businesses, and mainly driven by the remote working environment. But not only the employees, but also the students they're working and getting the education, their devices are at risk. So there is a significant development on that side, which is welcoming for the digital world, but the threats that it exposes to, and our colleague Ahmad mentioned, that the quantum of that risk is beyond our imagination. The damages that it can make is huge. We have seen in the past, last year, the Capital One bank, the leakage that happened on the privacy, and those countries that having a strict privacy law that could have a huge reputational damages. The attack on the supply chain, that could not only impact the one industry or one company, but it has an impact on the country as a whole. We have seen the impact of the cyber attack on the oil industry very recently, and we have seen how it impacted the oil price for that particular week because of the supply chain disruption as a result of the cyber attack on the network. So compared to the losses and the damages, there is definitely it's no-brainer to have a technology, use of technology to prevent those attacks and damages. And what Ahmad mentioned, the IBM solution on the artificial intelligence, that is something that is needed, because this kind of solution needs to keep evolving. So those attackers and scammers, they are always ahead of the curve. And for them to control this, it is important that you use a technology, this artificial intelligence and deep learning. And a solution which is nowadays in the trend, which is called zero trust solution. I'm not sure if companies are offering, but this is what banks are now trying to adopt. So
yeah, Ahmad is shaking his head, so possibly yes.
So maybe Ahmad has an answer for that, a solution for that. We can talk about it. But that's something that now industries, we are going for preventive, more into a reactive approach.
Okay, so let me stay with the banking sector. Anis, I know I took my time to come to you because you have such a important perspective from a practitioner, from a banking perspective, okay? What I would love to hear from you is regarding the security threats. Okay, we all agree, all the experts we heard from, they all agree on the need to digitize, to go through AI, to go through the latest trends and tech solutions. But the high concerns we hear regarding security is really a big challenge for banks. From your perspective, how are you tackling the security issues and concerns? And do you have any plans to deflect future threats that you can share with us?
As it was rightly mentioned by you and the colleagues, that security is a major concern and technology is evolving every day. And because it's evolving every day, sometimes something that is relevant now in matter of 2 or 3 years might become obsolete.
So 2 and 3 months with the track we're going, it's
yes.
it's no longer years anymore. I wish.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
So now in the banking industry, you can say we have a balancing act wherein we cannot adapt every new technology that comes into place because there are multiple security threats that even the creators of that technology might not be aware of yet. And at the same time, we cannot be very defensive, wherein we will fall behind compared to the competition. So in Bank Dhofar, we are trying to stay with the current technology and always introduce new technology, but in a safe way. So for example, we have introduced cardless cash services to our customers, wherein you don't need to have your card to do any transaction.
Cardless cash or cashless cards?
We have both of them, but this one is related to the ATM.
Interesting.
The cardless cash refers to using our ATM without having your card on you.
Interesting.
So
okay.
We have this service in our bank wherein you can go to any ATM, Bank Dhofar ATM, and if you're a Bank Dhofar customer, you put in your information through the ATM. You will receive a message on your mobile number. And that message contains a one-time password, OTP. You put it inside the ATM and you can get cash. You can perform some limited transactions to lower the security threat. So this type of technology is good to have from customer perspective, but for the bank, it's dangerous if you don't have any backup plans to mitigate the threat. Yes. So we have to, for example, ensure that the mobile number is registered with us. So if his mobile number changes, he needs to get a one-time password as well to ensure that it's the same person who's changing it on his old mobile number. So security-wise, you have to test the technology before you adopt it in the bank overall, and even for internal customers of the bank. So if you have introducing new technology to your staff, you need to ensure that the threats that are in it are to the minimum. So you reduce even internal fraud capabilities or possibilities, sorry. So you have to have a process in place to identify the gaps. So you have to have a proper user acceptance testing to ensure that minimal issues are in the system when it goes live.
I'm going to go back to Rakesh to discuss with you the training sessions that employees must undergo, obviously, to just stay up to date, to stay on track with all these new changes that could be overwhelming. What sort of training sessions is your bank rolling for employees to be ready for cybersecurity risks?
In our bank, we put a very lot of emphasis on the training program of our employees. Because you know that any chain is as strong as the weakest link. So if in our network, any of one of the employee, if he fails to adhere to the security precautions, security measures, our entire network is at threat.
Yeah.
So in this, we have a certain specialized program which we give to our people who through regular bulletins every month, every 15 days, or if some new events has happened, we try to disseminate the information to all employees so that they become conscious and aware of the new threats, new frauds, methods of fraud being adopted by the transfer. We have our one learning management system through which every employee has to.
Yalla, I'm sure you'll do it every 6 months very soon. Because 1 year is becoming absolute.
Like all new staff who's joining the bank or all new, even the fresh graduates, we have a special session for this cybersecurity awareness. And we have a special design test also for them. They have to undergo and pass them so that if they don't pass it, they go to, repeatedly, they have to be trained this. Similarly, we new staff or new people or everyone, we strive not to share the password. Whenever you leave your space, your seat, you should lock your screen. Clean desk policy, the dangers of sharing information, danger of clicking on the mails or downloading something that is there. Apart from that, we are also going the cybersecurity simulation, which includes phishing as well as ethical hacking. So in that, we try to see, the results are analyzed and we see if any employees are repeatedly falling into and falling prey to these mails. We give them specialized training for some 10 days or some 10 man hours, you can say, so that he becomes very conscious. And even if after that also, if he fails, naturally he is reprimanded. So that is the process we feel, and we see that when people are employees are conscious of the security threats. That is the whole idea.
I'm not sure about the reprimanding part. I would object to that, but I'm not with you at the bank, so we'll discuss that later on. Since you mentioned, Rakesh, you mentioned phishing, which is a very important topic. I'm going to stay on the topic and take the question to Ahmad, please. How can banks and financial institutions in general utilize adequate anti-fraud systems to avoid and prevent and detect phishing, identity theft, and other online threats?
Sure. You mentioned phishing, but of course there's like a very wide range of fraud scheme that a bank need to consider, including like a third-party fraud, like scam, phishing, farming, card cloning, but also like first-party fraud, like application fraud, insider fraud, employee fraud, which a bank want to detect, and that's usually financially driven. And there's of course the other category of financial crime, which linked around compliance, including anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, transaction filtering, which is more regulatory/reputationally driven, right? So the traditional approach to invest in an anti-fraud solution was to go about buying like a point solution for a specific type of financial crime. I would buy one product for, let's say, for the third-party fraud, another product for application fraud, one product for AML, another one for CTF. So today, financial institutions end up with a very large number of systems that they have to maintain, to integrate, to scale, and that's extremely costly for the banks to maintain on the longer run. So today, the newer approach and what banks are looking at is to really invest into like a multi-channel enterprise-wide platform for financial crime that can handle all that on a single platform, right? So here we're talking about, we're talking about an end-to-end system that have it all, from the data acquisition, from data model that can connect to all kind of like source system and different channels, to the detection engine, whether it's like rule-based or whether it's AI-based, all the way to alert and case management with all the UI that an investigator would need, with the workflow that they would need to consider. And of course, all the reporting mechanism to make sure everything is working as expected.
Quite ambitious. I don't know about the execution, but quite ambitious, I would say.
That's ambitious, but I think that's where the trend is going from my perspective. And I think one of the most important part into that whole chain is really the having a flexible, agile, open white box rules engine, right? Because today, like banks need to have a full freedom to tweak rules several times a week for different products, different channels, different geographies, and simulate the result like in a sandbox, check whether it's working well or not, whether it's going to improve the champion model that I have, like a champion challenger kind of mechanism, and then deploy it into production. Wow, I had, I think, the fire alarm being fired here in my building.
Oh, okay. So we're going to let Ahmad go and take care of that threat on your end. Okay. And we'll get back to you. Go check that alarm. While I stick on a little bit of this topic and go to Ahmad. Ahmad, we discussed breach of security, and I want to focus with you on the privacy concerns of customers. How can this be kept secure, preventing fraud? And how do you think banks are able to use digital solutions to keep this privacy, to keep this information safe through applying innovative digital solutions?
As we've seen that the banking industry is leading the way in implementing digital transformation. And according to IDC research in the Middle East and Africa, banking industry is expected to spend around $2.9 billion in 2024. With these, digital transformation drives and everything moving to digital, like you said, it's having the trust of your customer is going to be key. It's what's going to give the banks the comfort to their customers that their data is free, data is secure. And this is something, and that makes head of security, head of risk, think about investing in technology differently and in processes as well to make sure that the customer data is kept private, it's kept secure, is not, because at the end, this is the main target for fraudsters. It's that data that will allow them to be able to do fraudulent attacks. So more investment in digital transformation means that we need to also think about the digital innovations in cybersecurity as well. So like we mentioned it before, AI and machine learning are a game changer, because at the end, those who are trying to do fraudulence are not always, they're going it from a, let's say, legitimate track or trying to access it legitimately using stolen credentials. So in areas like this, you need technologies and innovations like AI and machine learning to be able to detect and analyze those different strokes. I mean, the difference between how a user, when he logs into his online banking, what's the usual way that he goes into, how is his mouse moving on the screen, versus how a bot or a fraudster would behave when they're accessing those services. So it becomes very critical for to have technologies like AI and machine learning.
I'm gonna pause here because you mentioned something very important, which is the customers. You said the customers or the banks need to have the trust of the customers, because now we're seeing a lot of incidents where customers themselves are falling prey to these accidents. So if you allow me just to ask Salman, What are banks doing to educate customers themselves? And I open a bracket here. I know this happened to not just a customer, to a bank employee who got a phone call saying, we are from the central bank doing this and that, doing an auditing, and we need this and this information. She handed over the information, and the money was taken out of her account within 30 minutes. So what are banks doing to educate customers?
Yeah, that's very important. And actually, because customers, they trust banks. And that is a blind trust somehow. Your RM, somebody makes a call and say, hey, I'm calling from bank ABC. And there is some information that we require for you to process this transaction. Because we know this customer, they deal with a big bank. And it's very common. You can say,
yes.
Yeah, 8 out of 10 people deal with this bank. So it's very common. You can make a call and you say that the bank needs this information for you to process the transaction. And there is a check we receive or something. And we know that the customer is very active dealing with that bank. So that customer, what we do and a bank should do actually is to educate the customer that you will only receive a call from an authorized person. The bank do not ask for the personal information on the phone, on the email, or other medium. If there's some information required, there's always a two-factor authentication. And then you may require a personal visit or call to your RNs directly. We don't make a call. You can verify or send a call back to your RM that is this a request genuine, and what is the reason for that call? That needs to be understood. So large corporates, they have some transactions which they require a RM to get involved. So it is not possible that another department makes a call and asks for certain information, which is completely ununderstandable. So nowadays, customers are also getting that awareness. Through banks, through social media, and as technology is evolving, a lot of communication is happening, and the cases are, it goes very faster or at a faster speed that those messages. So we give the information on the internet banking when the moment they log in. So we give this disclaimers and the information notes. That advisory is also issued on the time-to-time basis.
Let me tell you, Salman, nobody reads disclaimers. I'm going to tell you from now. Nobody reads disclaimers. They just don't read disclaimers. Nobody has the time.
That's right. But when we know that not a single person can do a transaction and that a verification process is there, then it becomes a responsibility on the individual that if he does any mistakes, so customer, because the bank does whatever is best in the interest of the customer, but at the end, the customer takes the responsibility.
Salman, you're also breaking up a little bit. So let me ask Anis the same question, please. What are you doing to educate your own customers about this? Personally, I don't take any phone calls from anyone claiming to be from any bank, whether it's a bank I'm dealing with or a new bank. I just simply say, if I'm interested, you can send me an email. Otherwise, I don't do any banking transactions via the phone. What is your bank doing to educate customers?
As mentioned by Mr. Salman, we send quarterly SMS messages reminding them not to give their information to people, anybody calling, because they've been falling prey for this kind of fraud. And in addition to that, there are flyers, there are whenever a customer comes to the bank as well, he opens a new account, all this information is available. But the challenge is, as you mentioned, nobody reads the disclaimers. So
you're always in fine print at the end of a page or a document, and people are just busy. And I think our attention spans are now shorter than a golden fish, probably 5 seconds attention span. Nobody reads. So yes, I think it's a challenge. You're right.
Yeah, so it's the bank is trying in multiple ways to raise the awareness to the customers, whether it was through messages when they call the call center, for example, while they are waiting for their call to be picked up, or sometimes through the quarterly SMS messages. And even if they come and open a new account, all these things are discussed. But again, we need to find more ways to educate the customers. So sometimes it's on the employee of the bank himself to raise awareness around his circle, and then his circle will raise awareness around their circle. So, and they are getting more creative in ways to make customers give their information. So they are very active. The best people to monitor new products that you introduced are those fraudsters. They try to find a way in getting more information. So for example, if you release an ad saying that, oh, we have this new type of loan, they'll start calling people and saying, oh, would you like to get a student loan, for example, that Bank Dhofar is offering? I'm from Bank Dhofar, so please give me this and this. So we have to keep educating customers, and even every person in the banking industry needs to educate his circle, and the circle grows bigger. So that's the main way to fight.
And of course, none of you mentioned this, but I'm going to. The best way to raise awareness about this is to do what all of you are doing now, going on webinars and going on social media and raising your voice and writing posts and engaging with people's concerns that are being thrown in the digital sphere. So I'm going to take that to Rakesh. You mentioned several times that you update and you do yearly trainings and yearly reviews. As the head of operational risk management, how continuously do you review your bank's risk strategy? And what further investments are you making for cyber resilience?
See, at our bank, we have this review. We obtain a periodic dashboard of all from the operational risk perspective of all activities. We ensure that all monitoring softwares are working fine as per the expectations. We ensure that year-long activities are performed as per the schedule. We ensure that our data center is ISO 27001 certified. So we ensure that their certification is current and they continue to adhere to the security norms which are prescribed by ISO standards. Then awareness session and phishing stimulation, these exercise also we try to do. We are trying to contemplating to use of AI and artificial intelligence to for fraud prevention and detection, and cybersecurity by aligning our resources, skill sets, processes, and all those. So in that process, we are now in the process of using AI. So we are trying to engage. That is the future. Our efforts to engage AI, to involve AI, to use AI for our fraud preventions and other monitoring mechanisms.
Everything's going to be automated. I think a year from now, all of us will be avatars and we wouldn't be physically doing this webinar, and avatars will be doing it on our behalf. So you mentioned something important, which is AI. I see Ahmad shaking his head. Ahmad, you took care of that threat?
No, one thing I would like to add.
Yes, go ahead. Before I go to Ahmad, go ahead.
Yeah, this, you see, we are trying to tell that there should be a culture in the organization that security is not responsibility of one particular group, like information security or operational risk or this. It has to be like each individual wise.
Collective.
So that type of message we are trying to propagate to among all our employees. And we see that everybody is conscious of their roles and try to adhere to the maximum extent possible about their security measures.
Okay, I'm going to take that to Ahmad. I see that you took care of the threat on your end, Ahmad. Rakesh mentioned AI, and I'd like to talk to you about the use of AI in digital payments, in processes. How can banks make use of AI, in shortening the time of processing of transactions of whatever it is that customers need?
Sure, Jesse. So by the way, sorry about the previous. That was actually a false alert that the AI engine should have detected, but it has not. So this is one
interesting.
This is one use case for us, for IBM, to go implement now at the building side. So I think it's important also to talk about here really the latest trends and advances in AI. And I think how it can really benefit the banks, right?
Yes.
And when we talk about trends and advances here, I'm not here to talk about the hype that we see on TV around flying robots and drones and so on. I'm talking about what's really happening right now. What are the technologies being being made available today that the bank can really benefit from. So I think the first part is really what we call the auto AI. So traditionally, the word AI used to scare banks, right? They think this is not for us. This is too complex to implement. I need to hire an army of data scientists, of mathematicians to go and build these kind of like algorithm and models for me. So that's no more the case. With auto AI today, we have the capability to really automate the end-to-end pipeline for fraud detection model in one click button. All what we have to do is to bring in the right data to the system, and then the auto AI algorithm will take care of building the whole pipeline, including data preparation, feature engineering, hyperparameter optimization, model selection, all the way to model deployment that the banks can start benefiting from. So today AI has been made available and accessible for a larger audience of people. So we talk about democratizing AI and making it accessible for the business analyst, the data analyst, right? Even if you have like a basic knowledge of analytics, you can get started and build your own models. So that's really, I think, one of the game changer we are seeing that can benefit banks and FIs in general. Another one I would say is deep learning. So of course, deep learning is not new, right? It's born in the 1950s. We start to hear about neural network, but they became popular only like 5 or 7 years ago. Why? Because today we have the right infrastructure, right, with the GPUs, graphical processing units, that can process huge amount of data very efficiently. So what used to take weeks and months to build a neural network now can take hours, right? And that can really benefit a lot of the banks, because today we are not only limited to handle and analyze transactional or structured kind of data, we can also take it to the other level where we can analyze unstructured data like documents, text, for example, KYC form, trade licenses, and so on. We can go analyze even images and videos from your ATM cameras or your branch cameras. Even we can go analyze speech and audio from your call center to be able to detect if there's any suspicious activity happening over there. So deep learning, I think, is also another trend which is really being available today, thanks to the availability of the infrastructure and the software that can really make it happen. And the last point I would like to add, if I may, is the trustworthy AI, right? Because we can have the best model, the best algorithm in the world with the best accuracy, 99% accuracy. But if the banks or the business users don't trust the outcome from that model, they see it as a black box, they're just not going to use it. So it's going to be useless, right? So being able to offer like a white box approach, even if we deal with neural network, is very important. So being able to explain for the business user, why do I think that transaction is fraudulent? Why do I think it's money laundering? It's very critical so they can trust the outcome of that AI model. So that's one side of trustworthy AI, but also the other side is fairness and bias. How can I make sure that the model is fair towards like minority groups, is not discriminating based on race, ethnicity, age, gender, or so on, making sure I'm offering like a fair outcome and not discriminating based on such criteria. And the last thing is, of course, quality. Because a model built like 6 months ago or 1 year ago, I can tell you today that it will start to drop accuracy from day one, right? Because everything is changing. We have a new product, new market dynamics, new customer behavior. So being able to monitor your model lifecycle and check its accuracy and check it's still behaving as expected, and being able to react very quickly to refresh the model on your most recent data is also very important, right? So if I conclude, auto AI, deep learning, and trustworthy AI, I think these are the latest trend, which I think can really benefit banks today. And I will have maybe to just put maybe one marketing term that today with IBM solution with safer payment, really we have it all. Today we have this multi-channel enterprise-wide solution for financial crime that is used today by more than 4,000 financial institutions that include processing companies, payment switches, and banks, being leveraged today by more than 4 million merchants. And and analyzing today 72 billion transactions per year, right? So we're seeing really huge amount of adoption of our solution across the globe and across different kind of like fraud scheme.
Okay, great. So staying on along those lines, I'm going to Ahmad. If you can briefly give us some examples of the solutions that you offer for banks to shield themselves from malicious activity. And I'm very interested in knowing more about customizing. How can banks customize some of these strategies or prevention strategies?
So, Jesse, at GBM, we understand the challenges that banks go through, and more specifically, head of risk and operations and security officers go to be able to manage the different areas that they have within the bank. And we look at multiple pillars like application, data, users. And based on these challenges, GBM has provided or we've built a cybersecurity framework that provides end-to-end solutions to tackle each of these challenges, and as well as complementing it with services across all of these areas. And we focus on 3 areas: on people. So we mentioned a lot about people and awareness, and as well on top of awareness is training the people, having the right resources, having the right skill sets to build that cybersecurity strategy. Second thing is processes. At the end, processes strengthen the tools and the people. If you have strong processes, it'll make it harder for fraudulent or cyber crimes to go through. And finally is the use of technology. So products. Now we look at, when we build the solutions and build the strategy or prevention strategy, we need to think about the entire life cycle, threat life cycle. Now, while it's being, let's say, there's a lot of moving forward in this area, but we still a lot of organizations focusing on prevention. So I need to prevent this attack from happening. But right, so if you saw, I think my colleagues mentioned before, we need to look at the full life cycle. We need to not only spend and look at prevention, but also prediction. Let me understand if I'm going to have something else. And detection. We need to understand, banks need to understand if something is happening. And finally, prevention, response. So I have been attacked. What can I do? How can I make the impact as minimum as possible with the least amount of losses, with the least amount of fraud that is happening? So you need to look at the entire threat life cycle. So we, as GBM, we provide a lot of like security intelligence, incident response, threat hunting solutions, deception technologies, and online fraud management solutions to be able to support our customer with this threat life cycle.
Okay, that makes sense. You've mentioned a lot of solutions that we discussed in details, and I'd like to throw the last question to Salman regarding how the branch networks are actually shrinking now, and there is a rise in digital payments. It was encouraged, obviously, in the past few months in this disastrous year that everybody has went through. What strategies and resources are being deployed to optimize, mitigate, and ensure that they're also curtailing future threats?
Yeah, this in pandemic time, we have seen a surge in the volume, a significant surge. Yet in the volume, and there's also demand from the consumers, including the corporates, that the amount, the limit of the transaction has increased because there is no physical visits to the branches. So yet the transaction has to happen. So what we did as a strategy, we reduce our reliance on people and move more into system and adopted technologies. What we wanted and what we noticed in the banking industry is particularly that there is a need for agile solutions, because those many things that are happening in each bank has a different infrastructure and architecture. So what is compatible to the system, what is not, and what is the surrounding system. So those kind of the challenges and the time to implement those. So the banks were looking for solutions that are quicker to implement, they're reasonable in the investment time, and then also efficient. They're able to protect the system and also prevent from the threats. So this mainly what I want to say is that from the people and the process strengthening is the one part, but more reliance on the system was something that the banks has adopted, and that's what the future is. The banks are all moving to putting the controls in the system, and I see there is a greater demand on the adopting the latest technologies because the threats are always evolving. We implemented a system control that not only identifying or verifying system the access, but also the validating the devices at every stage in the network. Because the one time verification will not help. So the authentication process in the system to protect the identity threats or unauthorized access. But the other threats remain there, which is from the insiders. So to control that, so that is very important that we control from not on the external side, the insider threats are very crucial, especially in that time when the people got access to work from home. Invariably, that is what the industry is exposed to. So I would go what Ahmad said is something that industry now needs to definitely needs to consider that leads technology driven by the AI and deep learning.
Perfect. Anis, I'd like to get your perspective on this. You're the head of operational risk. How has your bank combined technology and AI to curb cybercrime and digital fraud?
Now, I was saying I cannot go into specifics of every system, but these are the types of systems that we have in place in the bank.
Oh, see, I think that I don't know if you're in the office, but that internet cut out when you were talking about those systems. I'm just saying, so maybe that's a good sign. Maybe you have a good prevention system at your bank if you're in the office.
In place.
Exactly, it's being very well implemented. Type. I mean, we've covered all the areas we wanted to discuss. I'd like to briefly conclude, maybe with Ahmad, and the very last brief question, so we remain on time. You all agreed that customers here are the backbone of all these institutions, that they require trust, that they require raising awareness and a continuous communication. How can banks achieve a secure platform to keep pace with all these digital services and tools and solutions that you have discussed today and avoid gaps or vulnerabilities?
So, Jesse, when you look at vulnerabilities, you need to understand the vectors that you are facing these vulnerabilities at. And when you're looking at the digital services that any bank is providing, we look at it, first of all, the platform itself, the digital channels, so like mobile banking or online banking. And then you look at the actual systems, the internal systems of any bank. And looking at the channels first, one critical aspect is identity governance. We need to understand the identity of those users who are accessing this platform, or the users. Are they bots? Are they legitimate? And if it's legitimate, is it legitimate with the right intent? It's not a stolen credential. And this is where AI comes into play. So identity governance solutions like identity and access management, artificial intelligence, privileged access management for the super users is key here when you're looking at their platform. And then there's your internal systems where there's a vast amount of solutions that we discussed, the threat landscape of detection, prevention, prediction, and response. And we need to adhere to these areas, and we need to look at it holistically and cover all the areas, from the users, from the data itself, which is very critical for us, and then looking at the application and what can we do around the application, in terms of and how often in terms of vulnerability assessment, making sure that the application is always built with security in mind, and not just security to be bolted on as an add-on after because this is a mistake that a lot of, or let's say some, we need to keep an eye out, is functionality is important, but security is just as important. So we need to have them hand in hand and not just look at the functionality as well.
Yeah, not as a separate entity. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, this is all the time that we have had for today. We've discussed how digital transformation is affecting the banking sector, and we heard perspectives from banks, from IT solutions. You all shed some light on the latest trends in cybersecurity crimes, the challenges, solutions. You discussed multi-platform solutions, automation, deep learning, safer payment solutions, and how to prevent and mitigate online attacks. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel between or in partnership between Forbes Middle East and GBM Oman, and we'll see you on the next panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jess.